Week 13 of the college football season has arrived. This is the penultimate weekend of the regular season. I am Johnny Sports Network, here to provide you with my Week 13 college football predictions. This is the main 7 for the week. And the slate of games this week, it's not the most exciting that we've had this season, but it's not a bad slate. It's in fact a pretty good slate considering it's the penultimate weekend of the regular season. Because a lot of the time, the penultimate weekend of the regular season, a lot of the games, a lot of the matchups, they look one-sided. And that's partly because half the SEC, maybe 2/3 of the SEC, is playing FCS teams. But when I looked through the list of games for this week, it's one of the best lineups that I think we've had for a penultimate weekend in a long time, maybe even ever since I started watching college football. But before we get to the Week 13 predictions, some of the major headlines from Week 12. Perhaps the biggest headline of the week: Texas A&M ranked third in the college football playoff rankings, trailing at home 30-3 at halftime against South Carolina. But then Texas A&M, they rallied to win 31-30 and putting them right in reach of a college football playoff spot. Marcel Reed, over 300 passing yards in the second half. Oklahoma going on the road to Tuscaloosa and upsetting Alabama, handing Alabama their first home loss in the Kalen DeBoer era, and Kalen DeBoer's first loss when he wears his black hoodie. Notre Dame dominant on the road against Pittsburgh. I talked about last week how I felt like Pittsburgh was Notre Dame's last test of the season. As I anticipate Notre Dame, they'll handle Syracuse and Stanford pretty easily. Virginia with a dominant win on the road against Duke. Friday night, Clemson upsetting Louisville on the road. Louisville, they missed multiple field goals. A missed extra point as well for Louisville. Georgia Tech surviving and advancing on the road against now 1-10 Boston College. And Georgia with a dominant win at home against Texas. What does Week 13, the penultimate weekend of the regular season, have in store for us? The 7 games, the main 7 this week. Nebraska, Penn State. TCU, Houston. Louisville, SMU. Pittsburgh, Georgia Tech. BYU, Cincinnati. Missouri, Oklahoma. And USC and Oregon. Without further ado, let's get to the Week 13 college football predictions right here on the Johnny Sports Network. The first game on the docket this week, Nebraska and Penn State. Nebraska off of a bye week. Matt Rule returning to his alma mater, while Penn State, they finally got back into the win column, ending their 6-game losing streak. And to say that this season did not go the way Penn State was hoping for it to go would be an understatement. Penn State, they had national championship aspirations, started second in the rankings. Quarterback Drew Aller returning for his senior season. Your 1-2 running backs in Katron Allen, Nicholas Singleton also returning. But then they underperformed in their first few games this season. Then against Oregon in their whiteout game, losing in double overtime, and that's what began the 6-game losing streak. And Penn State parted ways with James Franklin after the third loss in the losing streak. And speaking of James Franklin, as I'm recording this, we're getting news that James Franklin and Virginia Tech are finalizing a deal for James Franklin to be the next head coach at Virginia Tech. And I'll have my reaction to that news on YouTube Shorts a little later. But back to the matchup. Nebraska running back Emmett Johnson, 5th in the FBS in rushing yards, with 1,131 on the season. For Penn State, Katron Allen, 917 rushing yards, 12 touchdowns, averaging 5.6 yards a carry. Nicholas Singleton, 419 rushing yards, 9 touchdowns, averaging less than 4 yards a carry. But the weak point for Nebraska, at least one of the two weak points of this Nebraska team this season, the run defense. They're 92nd in run defense, allowing 161 rushing yards a game. If Nebraska's defense can at least contain the run and force Penn State to have to throw the football to win this game, they have a chance, as Nebraska is 3rd in passing defense. Penn State is currently favored by 9.5 points. And to be honest, that kind of a point spread this late in the season with 2 backup quarterbacks, I think that's a lot. Maybe I'm completely overthinking things, but I think Nebraska is going to make this a lot closer than what everyone is thinking. I still think Penn State wins the game, however, because Penn State, they competed against Indiana really well. In fact, it took one of the luckiest catches of all time just for Indiana to defeat Penn State. I have Penn State winning, but I think Nebraska, they keep this within a touchdown. But I don't think many other people think so. TCU and Houston. TCU, they have been disappointing in their last couple of games. While Houston, they're a team this season that has exceeded expectations. 8-2 on the season so far. And Houston having success this season, I'm not surprised by it at all. In fact, I anticipated Houston would be at least an 8-win team with Connor Wegman at quarterback, because I know all about Connor Wegman's abilities, and he has shown a lot of potential in his career so far, but he has just dealt with injuries all throughout his career. As I mentioned, TCU has been disappointing their last couple of games. Not only have they lost 2 in a row, after it looked like they could get into the top 25, they've only averaged 15 points a game in their last 2 games, 17.67 in their last 3 games. And last week against BYU, we saw TCU wide receiver Eric McAllister get a little frustrated at quarterback Josh Hoover. But overall, Josh Hoover's had a strong season, 9th in the FBS in passing yards. TCU has allowed an average of 26.5 points per game, 83rd in the FBS. While Houston, they had a bye week last week, so extra time to prepare for this matchup. While TCU, they don't have momentum right now. They're on a 2-game losing streak. And if I correctly recall, they've lost 3 of their last 4 games. Houston is 47th in scoring defense, giving up an average of 22.1 points a game. Houston, they also do a good job at defending the pass, 41st in passing defense. I'm going to go with Houston in this game. Even though they did lose to West Virginia at home a couple of weeks ago, I still have been more impressed with Houston as of late than I have TCU. TCU's offense has been struggling in these last 3 to 4 weeks, and I think Houston, they take advantage of that situation. Louisville and SMU, as said in the beginning of the video, Louisville, they have lost 2 consecutive games at home. And this week, they are on the road against a SMU team who last season was one of several teams who flew under the radar and exceeded expectations. SMU made the ACC championship game last season, made the playoff. This season has been a pretty good season for SMU, I would say. They may be 7-3, but they've only really played one completely bad game all season. At least just one bad game all season on both sides of the ball. They are currently 7-3 on the season. They had an upset win at home against Miami a couple of weeks ago. Louisville wide receiver Chris Bell, 871 receiving yards on the season, 12th in the FBS, 2nd in the ACC, and Chris Bell was a key difference maker in Louisville's upset win on the road against Miami earlier in the season. SMU quarterback Kevin Jennings, he's in the top 12 in the FBS in passing yards this season. SMU defensively, they're 100th in total defense, giving up over 400 yards a game. They're 135th in pass defense. But despite this, SMU's defense is plus 11 in turnover margin. They're 6th in the FBS in that. But here's a note that could be a bit concerning if you're on the SMU side of things this week. SMU opponents, they average 77.3 plays a game, the most in the FBS. SMU is currently one of 4 teams in the ACC with only 1 loss in conference play. SMU still has something to play for. Louisville, they don't anymore. Even though I am concerned that SMU's opponents average over 77 plays a game, I still like SMU in this game. I like the momentum they're on compared to Louisville. Louisville, they've lost 2 consecutive games. They were in a position to make a run at winning the ACC, and that's completely disappeared in the last 2 weeks. I'm going to go with SMU, but something about it just tells me this is only going to be a 3-point game. But I still think SMU wins outright. As far as them winning by more than 4 points, I think they will, but I just have concerns that this is only going to be a 3-point game. Because that's just what it feels like to me just looking at this matchup. But I would take SMU to cover 3.5. Pittsburgh and Georgia Tech. Pittsburgh, a disappointing performance against Notre Dame. And honestly, I was expecting Pittsburgh to at least be better than what they were. But a big question that I have, was Pittsburgh even trying in that game whatsoever? Because early on in the week, in a press conference, Pittsburgh head coach Pat Narduzzi, he said that he doesn't care if Notre Dame scores 100. As long as they win the next two games, that's all he cares about. I don't know about you, but if I was a player, I would not want my head coach saying something like that going into a big matchup. Meanwhile, Georgia Tech on the road survive and advance on a game-winning field goal against now 1-10 Boston College. But that's not the only game that Georgia Tech has played close this season. Georgia Tech is led by quarterback Haynes King, who's ninth in the FBS in total yards accumulated, with 3,066 on the season. Georgia Tech leads the FBS in total offense, averaging 446.7 yards a game. I apologize, 496.7 yards per game. But defensively, they're 105th in total defense, allowing 409.2 yards per game. I am intrigued to see how Pittsburgh starts this game to respond after last week's loss to Notre Dame. As Jeremiah Love had a dominant afternoon against Pittsburgh's defense last week, I think we'll see some improvement from Pittsburgh this week from last week. I do think it will be a high-scoring game, but in the end, I'm going to go with Georgia Tech. As Georgia Tech, they are no strangers to close games this season compared to Pittsburgh. There's been multiple occasions this season where Georgia Tech, they have had to survive and advance. And that's the theme of college football, especially in the month of November. And I think in a high-scoring game, Georgia Tech gets the victory. BYU and Cincinnati. BYU dominant win at home against TCU last week, while Cincinnati a loss at home against Arizona. And my key notes for this game, Cincinnati wide receiver Cyrus Allen, 10 receiving touchdowns on the season, tied for the most in the Power Four. BYU is 15th in the FBS in time of possession. I'm bringing this up because I do think it will likely come into play in this game. Cincinnati leads the FBS in fourth down conversion percentage. Cincinnati's 13 for 15 on fourth down this season. Multiple times throughout the season, I have brought up Cincinnati quarterback Brendan Sorsby's efficiency and him not turning the ball over. However, in the last two games, Brendan Sorsby has thrown 3 interceptions. We know that BYU likes to run the football. Cincinnati's run defense last week against Arizona, 180 rushing yards allowed, while against Utah, 267. Utah, another team that likes running the football. In BYU's last game on the road against Texas Tech, BYU's run defense gave up 198 yards to the Texas Tech running backs. There has been some games this season on the road where BYU has given up a lot of yards. On the road against East Carolina earlier in the season, 404 total yards of offense. Against Iowa State, 495 yards of offense. And Cincinnati, they are in a position to play spoiler. Cincinnati does not have anything to lose at this point. BYU, they have just about everything to lose. And college football in November, chaos is inevitable. The X factor in this game is going to be which team runs the football better in this matchup. And interesting enough, BYU averaging 195.1 rushing yards per game, Cincinnati 194.5 rushing yards per game. But I think with the home crowd for Cincinnati knowing that they're in a position to play spoiler and spoil BYU's season, I think they pull off the upset. And they respond to last week's loss against Arizona. Missouri and Oklahoma. Missouri, a team that is looking to finish the season strong. A Missouri team that doesn't have anything else left to lose, but a lot left to potentially gain. Head coach Eli Drinkwitz, his name has been a potential candidate for Penn State, maybe even Florida as well. Not 100% sure at the moment, but that is another conversation for another day. Oklahoma with an emotional victory on the road, an upset win against Alabama. So Oklahoma entering this game off an emotional win. Could we see Oklahoma start this game flat? Because we do see that happen on occasion. When a team has a big win or even a big loss, they tend to start the next game a little flat. I acknowledged last week that Oklahoma's victory on the road against Tennessee, that was a game that was carried by their defense and special teams. And that is what happened again last week against Alabama. Oklahoma was outgained in that game 406-212. Missouri is down to third-string quarterback Matt Zollers. Missouri defensively, they are 10th in total defense. But the overall strength of this Missouri team is their running game. They're 6th in the FBS in rushing offense, running for nearly 242 yards a game. Running back Ahmad Hardy, 1,346 rushing yards on the season, which leads the FBS. Oklahoma, however, they're 4th in the FBS in run defense, only giving up an average of 82 rushing yards a game. They're also 2nd in the FBS in team sacks this season with 37. Oklahoma quarterback John Mateer, he has been slowly but surely starting to show signs that he is starting to go back to the way he played before the thumb surgery. Despite Missouri being 10th in total defense, I think that this is going to be John Mateer's best game that he's played since the thumb surgery. I do think that even though Missouri is down to Matt Zollers, I think they have the potential of keeping this a one-score game. But I think when it's all said and done, I think Oklahoma, they pull away in the second half and win by multiple scores. Concluding today's video with the game of the week, USC and Oregon. There has been some concerns about Oregon offensively. Oregon's offense hasn't been reaching their fullest potential as of late, more often than not. But they had a dominant win against Minnesota last week, while USC, they had a pretty tough game against an underrated Iowa team. The same Iowa team, Oregon, they struggled against the week before. USC quarterback Jaden Mayava, he is towards the top in passing yards this season, 10th, if I recall correctly. USC is 10th in passing offense. Oregon, they lead the FBS in pass defense. Both teams, they convert on third down really well. USC 8th in third down conversion percentage, Oregon 12th. Both of these teams are also in the top 10 in scoring offense. Oregon in 7th, scoring 39 points a game. USC 10th, averaging 38.2 points per game. USC wide receiver Makai Lemon, 1,090 receiving yards this season, 3rd in the FBS. When I was writing down my notes for the games this week, I saw that Oregon was favored by 8.5. Then last night, it went up to 9.5. And as the moment I'm recording this, it's up to 10.5. Perhaps it goes back down to 9.5 by kickoff. But Oregon defensively, they're 3rd in total defense, only giving up 235.4 yards a game. 6th in scoring defense, only giving up 13.7 points per game. USC defensively, it's not great, it's not good, but they've done pretty well this season compared to other Lincoln Riley defenses in the past. If I recall correctly, they're 63rd in total defense. So they're in the top half of the FBS. I was really considering taking USC to lose by less than 10. But with this being a game between two offenses that are in the top 10 in scoring offense, and when one team has a significantly better defense, about 8 or 9 times out of 10, the team with the better defense will win. And maybe between 60 and 70% of the time, that team will win convincingly. These are two teams that are not the friendliest against the spread this season. Oregon 6-4, USC 5-5. I'm going to go with Oregon. However, as far as winning by 11 or more, I'm not convinced either way as of this moment early on in the week. I'll post a comment in the comment section on Thursday or Friday regarding that. And that will do it for my Week 13 college football predictions. Today was the main 7. My NFL picks for Week 12 will be uploaded tomorrow. Best of the rest Wednesday or Thursday. Takeaways from college football and the NFL will be on YouTube Shorts later in the week. My reaction to James Franklin finalizing a deal to be Virginia Tech's next head coach, that I plan to have on YouTube Shorts by sometime tonight. And then next week for Week 14, Rivalry Week. That is all I have for you today. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for your support today and throughout the entire season. And until next time, have a good one.